Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to my channel. Welcome to another video in keeping with the momentum of the past the past 3 days. I will be continuing on with the process of the 12-step program, right? Again, doesn't matter if it's AA, NA, HA, whatever A it is. The 12 steps are the same, and that's because the solution to the issue is the same. We're talking about overcoming obstacles here, and the 12 steps can be used in any form or for any form of obstacle or issue that one may find themselves in. So, step 4, well, let's do a recap, I guess. Step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over whatever issue, right? We couldn't figure out how to solve the issue, and that our lives had become unmanageable. Those of an alcoholic inclination were powerless over their ability to quit drinking, or seemingly so. Typically programming oneself to keep drinking by drinking every day, or all day every day, or any time that one gets sad or upset to numb out emotions. Typically that programming, or even getting drunk or drinking anytime that you want to feel happy, or anytime that you do feel happy, especially if one feels happy all the time, then they're going to chase alcohol, right? It's what you're doing with your repetitive actions is you're programming your brain. You're programming the subconscious mind to chase after whatever that is, right? Hence why it's a program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a replacement of programming. Rather than programming yourself with alcohol all the time, you're programming yourself with getting together with like-minded people and working to achieve a common goal, which is stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Basically, trust God, clean house, help others is what that comes down to. Right. Now, in the spirit of cleaning house, we move on to the biggest step in action, right? Because it's probably the reason why I call it the biggest is because it takes a lot of insight. You really got to introspect and look at yourself and analyze, self-analyze, and be honest about it in order for this to really take its effect. So step 4, recap again. Step 1, admitted that there was a problem, that lives were unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that some power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Whether it's the entire group that you're in, whether it's your own conception of God, doesn't matter. Something that is greater than yourself, more powerful than yourself, could restore you to right thinking and clarity, unity, wholeness, oneness, balance. And then step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to that power, over to that higher power, right? Turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And now moving on to step 4, we really get into the modality of action, right? So we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, or in the first person, I made a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, first and foremost, it takes courage, which is the principle of the 4th step of Alcoholics Anonymous. Courage. It takes courage to really do any sort of project of self-seeking, or I shouldn't call it self-seeking, introspection is more appropriately coined or termed in this phrase, or in this instance. It takes a lot of courage to really honestly look at yourself, self-analyze, And especially look at where the individual, their own self, has gone wrong. What problems have I occurred, or what problems have I incurred through my own thoughts, emotions, and actions? What problems have I created in other people's lives? Not just my own life, but other people's lives. You know, and what am I holding on to that other people have done to me? And so that's what this step's really about. It's figuring out where your own self has gone wrong or incorrect. So, out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I figured I'd just read a little bit. So on page 64, starting at line 8, it says, "Therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke." So if you're not taking an inventory and clearing out the clutter and getting an honest inventory of what things are, as in the truth, this is usually where an individual ends up. Okay, so continuing on. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. Now, this is important because one's own values are what we're talking about here. If the owner of the business or the owner of the body is going to be successful, he cannot fool himself about what his true values are, what it is that he likes, what it is he dislikes, what it is that he's about and not about, who he truly or she truly is at the core of things. But that's what this is all about, is getting down to the nitty-gritty of what is and what is not. Okay? What things are of value to the business, right? The body, the body and mind, right? The individual in charge of that business. What things are of value, what things are not of value, what can be discarded and got rid of immediately without regret. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. So, the format of how this usually goes, at least the way that I've worked it, it's pretty simple. Now remember, this is a process that if you're going to embark upon, it is something that needs to be completed. Otherwise, it'll continue to eat at you. Especially once you bring those flaws up into the conscious realm, right? When you're conscious of your own flaws, if you don't continue on and carry it through to its completion, it'll start creating a process of guilt tripping your own self. And that's not anywhere, I mean, it's nowhere I want to be. I've been there. I beg of the listener to, if they're going to start this process, carry it forward to its completion. As Mark Passio would say, there are only two mistakes one can make when on the path to truth: not getting started and not going all the way. So, with that being said, the usual format that I've worked this moral inventory in is as follows. We've got names in one column, right? And this is starting with, let me backtrack, right? First starts with resentments, right? These are people, institutions, and principles. Basically anything that's causing you bitterness and ill will towards whatever. Whether it be Freemasonry, the Catholic Church, Hinduism, the banking industry. That was a big one for me. Doesn't matter, right? So the name of the person, institution, principle, whatever, in one column, and then what they did, and then in the next column it would be affects my, and in one final column we're looking at our own part, right? What was my part? Now, the way that I've always done this is I'll go through and just focus on the names, right? You sit there, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, so on and so forth, right? Until you get to the very end of all those names, of all those institutions, whatever they may be, and put all those resentments, or the people that you resent, the places that you, or institutions that you resent, right, that you're holding ill will and bitter feelings and just kind of darkness in your heart for. Get them all down on paper, just the names, right? And once you have come to the conclusion that that is everything that there is to look at, then you look at what it is that they did that caused this resentment in the first place. Okay, so let's say A is your boss, right? Well, my boss didn't give me the raise that I deserved. Or instead of giving me a raise, gave my enemy a raise. Right? And you'll do that for each individual thing on that list, right? You'll figure out all the reasons why this person elicited a response of resentment within you. Okay? And then for each one of these things, you'll go through and see what it is about your life that it specifically affected. Did it affect your self-esteem? Your pride? Ambitions? Did it affect your personal relationships? How about your sexual relationships or romantic relationships? Did these things, and it obviously these are just examples, right? Did it affect your emotional security? But basically, what that comes down to is how were you affected? What did it affect? If your boss didn't give you a raise when you thought you deserved it and instead gave your enemy a raise, like did that hurt your pride? Did that hurt your self-esteem? Did that make you not want to keep working for the company anymore or working for that individual, thus affecting your ambitions and your personal relationships? Did it make you want to give up? Like, if, say, your girlfriend cheated on you, did that affect your acceptable out in the open kind of romantic and sexual relations? Like, that's what that comes down to. That third column. And again, you're doing that for each one of these things. How were you affected? Right? And ultimately, at the end of it, we're looking for our own part. Okay? So, was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Was I fearful? Was I inconsiderate? Did I not consider that maybe my attendance is what got in the way of me getting a raise, and their attendance was on track even though I may be a top-notch worker when I do show up to work? If I'm consistently 5 minutes late and I've got the same work ethic, like if A and B have the same work ethic, but B shows up on time or 15 minutes early consistently and I'm 5 minutes late consistently, well, that's something to consider, And so, how exactly did I go wrong in that situation? What was my fault in it? Now, ultimately, almost all of them will come down to a combination of all four, at least from my experience. Because what I found is that in every single one of my resentments, I was at the core of everything. The ego was at the core of it all. I was constantly thinking about myself and myself alone. And because I didn't want to let go of these things, because I wanted to hold on to them, because I had this sense of entitlement, because I thought that I was owed something by my boss, or anybody else on that list, I wouldn't let things go. And so because of that, it's like they always say, holding resentment's like taking poison and expecting the other person to get hurt. So by holding on to such bitterness, I've only ultimately hurt myself. By projecting that negativity and that hatred out into the universe, that's exactly what I got back. But ultimately, like, all it did was hurt me in the long run. And so that's what this comes down to, is we're looking at these things so we can get an honest assessment of our hurt feelings, why they're hurt, and what exactly my part in things is. My own hurt feelings, happened because this person did this, it affected me in this way, and ultimately it comes down to this was my fault because, or not was my fault, right? But my part where I was at fault was in this fashion, right? And so these four right here, selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and inconsiderate behaviors and thoughts, ultimately are what one is supposed to look out for. Now, the same kind of pattern follows for the next list, right? And that would be a fears inventory. And it's the same concept, right? The 4 columns, name, and then what causes the fear, right? What is the cause of this fear? What does it affect within me? And we'll just put my part. So like let's say fear of the dark, right? Or we'll just put darkness. What's the cause of that fear in the dark? Danger lurking in the dark. Or tales of demons, which kind of goes hand in hand with that danger. Unable to see. What does it affect? Does it affect my personal relationships? Does it affect my self-esteem? How am I affected by this fear? What is it that is happening to me because I am fearful? Is my fear of failing at business affecting my ambition to seek out business? Is my failure or is my fear of being incorrect affecting my ambition to seek and speak truth just on the offshoot chance that I might be incorrect? Is it because I've got some sense of pride where I don't want to admit that I am wrong at something? That's the kind of stuff that we're looking for within this step. And then my part, since fear is already kind of part of this inventory, we're looking for selfishness, dishonesty, or inconsiderate. And so how does that play into things? Well, if I'm afraid of failing at business, if I'm afraid of being rejected, but for a high-paying position within a company, and you guys know how I feel about money, at least if you've watched my videos for any considerable length. I'm not exactly the biggest fan, but it's a necessary evil in a world where people are dependent upon what money can buy. Point being, if I need to make enough money to pay my bills, and I'm too afraid of being rejected for whatever higher paying position or whatever job that I would like to do, then ultimately I'm being selfish in avoiding what is uncomfortable. And by avoiding what is uncomfortable, I'm reinforcing myself to remain here in the darkness and in the weakness instead of the pursuing of strength. Anybody can sit there and not work out. Anybody can. It doesn't take an Olympic athlete to exercise only when they want to, right? But what makes an Olympic athlete is someone who works out even when they don't want to. So within that analogy that I made, if I'm afraid of being rejected by a company for a position I'm applying for, and so I don't apply for the company, or I don't apply for the position, and my family depends upon me making money, then I'm being inconsiderate of their needs as well as my own. So these are things that must be looked at if anyone wants to actually get over their fears and get over any sort of stumbling blocks. Funny how fear is what blocks one from even being in the root chakra. The root chakra is blocked by fear. Right? The very foundation of your light ultimately is blocked by fear. And we'd rather stay out of the unconscious lizard brain, right? The reptile brain. We'd rather not be a reptilian, right? So, the solution, first and foremost, is we have to understand what our fears are, right? Because if you don't know what it is that you are afraid of, how can you address those fears? If you would rather not be conscious of those fears, then, I mean, no one can force you out of the unconsciousness. Okay? So that's basically your fears inventory. You're going through and you're looking at your fears. You're looking at what the cause of that fear is. You know, like if I'm afraid of heights because I fell off a ladder, 15 years ago, like how is that fear still affecting me today? How is that event from the past still affecting me today? And what is my part in things? What is it that I'm holding on to? Like, what is my behavior? And that's the key to this step, is we're looking at ourselves more than anything else. Yeah, we're in the resentment list, we're looking at what other people did to us, but ultimately the focus is on ourselves. It's a personal inventory of ourselves, not other people, not other persons. So, moving on, next comes sexual harms. Now, remember, this is just the format that I've done this in, right? But most of us have had some sort of sexual harms committed against other people. Some of us have cheated on our spouses. Some of us have been cheated on. Some of us have, done some things that they're not proud of. Some people have gone to realms that, I haven't, and most other people haven't, But the point being is we're looking at who it is that we've harmed in that sexual way, and we're looking at what I did ultimately. So let's say if ex-girlfriend A was cheated on by me, right? How is this still affecting me? And ultimately, most people, when it comes to that sort of behavior, it's hard to try and make an amends to people. It's hard to let go of these things. If you did something when you were drunk and it mortifies you and horrifies you, it's usually something that sticks with you for a long time. But if you're ever to make any sort of leeway in life and everything, you have to look at these things. Again, did it affect my pride? If I used person A for sex, does it affect my personal relations? And usually what one finds is they have a lot more sexual skeletons in their closet than they might think. And so it's a big deal to be able to look at these things honestly, right? Especially considering the following step that comes after step 4. And then again, was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Was I inconsiderate? Was I fearful? What is it that I did? How does it still affect me? What ultimately is my part in that? And so that's what that boils down to. General format for that third inventory. And then there's one more inventory. Now, for those who've never worked this step, it is rough. It is definitely rough. It is something that takes time. You don't have to sit there and do it all in one shot. But progress, right? It doesn't have to be done in one shot. Little bit, piecemeal, a little bit at a time. You're working on this step, and you're working on taking an inventory of what other people did to you and how, like, ultimately your part in things and how it's still affecting you. You know, your fears, your sexual harms, and other miscellaneous harms towards other people. And it follows the same format. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down. What is it that I did? Okay, I stole from my mom. I did plenty of that. I don't just mean like some little kid kind of stealing. You know, when I was drinking heavily and I was abusing drugs the way I used to abuse drugs. Well, I guess I used to abuse them. And I don't really do drugs anymore. Kind of a good thing. But, you know, I stole from this person. You know, I slashed their tires. Or I put sugar in their gas tank. Or I lit their house on fire. Or I ran over their cat. Or, you know, I called them names when they didn't deserve it. You know, just because I was hurt, you know, whatever. You're doing that all the way down. Same thing on every other inventory, right? All the names, then what it is that you did against each person all the way down. How, like, ultimately, how you're affected by it. You know, I stole from them and now it affects my pride. Personal relations, material security, because now they won't even hang out with me, let alone, you know, help me out when I really need some help financially, because they think I'm just using them, or they don't trust me, or they themselves built up resentment, you know. So that category of things, right? Pride, personal relations, emotional security, self-esteem, material security, ambitions, acceptable sexual relations, hidden sexual relations, doing that all the way down, right? And then again, was I selfish? Dishonest? Fearful, inconsiderate, and ultimately, you'll notice that all this, what you did to the other person, and how you're affected, all boils down to that 4, right? That's ultimately your root right there. So one's either selfish, dishonest, fearful, or inconsiderate of others. And in so doing, these 4 things are the cause of so many issues in one's personal life. You know, selfishly holding on to resentment, being dishonest about your affairs and what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. You know, being fearful and letting that fear affect your decision making. Being inconsiderate of even yourself, but also others. And ultimately, being inconsiderate of others is being inconsiderate of your own self. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so ultimately, if you're being inconsiderate of your neighbor, you're being inconsiderate of yourself, because There is no separation between you and your neighbor, right? What you do will be invited back upon you. And this step is, if you do it honestly, thoroughly, like really get down into the nooks and crannies of your being, if you really get down into the dark caverns of your mind, little by little, you know, really like sweep it out. Like, this is about cleaning house, your own personal house, right? You're looking at your memory banks, so to speak, you know. You're looking at your memory banks and seeing what your fears are. You're seeing where your shame, or what you're shameful of, what you're guilty of doing, where you feel guilt, the grief that you hold, you know, that pain of loss. You're looking at the lies. You're looking at the illusions. And you're looking at your selfish, egoic attachments. And looking at all those things and recognizing that they're only a block to the spiritual light provided to you by the universe. That spiritual energy, that pure cosmic energy, these 7 things, right? The things that we talked about so far in this video, they end up creating emotional muck within the 7, and ultimately extinguishing the 7 candlesticks rather than keeping them aflame, rather than keeping them alight. So, this is what this step is getting down to. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty, seeing where we're at fault, seeing our own mistakes and our own aspects of life where we've fallen short, getting them down on paper, and really looking at them and being honest and thorough about it. And if you are honest and thorough and courageous through this step, and you carry that courage into the next step, which we'll be discussing tomorrow, then amazing things start to happen, right? But this is a process that needs to be worked to its completeness if the individual, the sufferer, is going to find any sort of happiness, any sort of joy, any sort of freedom in this world. And again, honest and thorough, but at the same time, don't sit too long on it, right? Don't sit too long on that step if you're going to start it, right? The sooner that you can get the emotional muck out, the sooner you can analyze the problems that you've created within yourself and within your environment, and the sooner you can work on clearing those things up, the better, right? The sooner that people can get back to a balanced way of living, right? So, I hope everyone got something out of this one. It's a bit longer. I'm kind of glad that I didn't just try and breeze through this thing. But if we're ever to find ourselves back to a way of balance within this world, right, we have to look at where we have caused fission or division or a splitting. We need to look at these and figure out how we can turn that fission back into fusion and take that division and bring it back to a state of unity, that splitting back into a place of wholeness. Because ultimately, these are the two aspects of logic, of existence that we know. And there is a balance between them that is meant to be found. So, I hope you got something out of this. I hope you liked it. It's step 4 is it's a humbling process. You know, if you're honest and thorough about it, it'll take you far. And if you do it on a regular basis and you try and keep up on your inventories, and yes, even I still work through steps. You know, here's the funny part about all this is, you know, I wrote 6.5 pages of resentments that I had against other people, and then I wrote 6.5 pages of why I resented myself. And when I looked at that, I honestly realized that all the reasons that I was resenting other people, all the hatred and bitterness that I had towards my fellow man, I was only hating myself. You know, except I was hating myself more, because not only was I hating that aspect of myself that did that contradictory behavior, but I was hating them and causing more pain upon myself, creating a cycle of hating myself because I was so angry and not able to figure things out. You know, and so this is meant to help the individual get back to a place of clarity, so that they can actually have the power to choose and the power to make their own decisions, you know, and really be able to see clearly and see the beauty of the forest rather than be distracted by the ugliness of some of its trees. To really be able to feel alive rather than just be alive and walking through life like some fucking zombie, right? So yeah, again, hope you guys got something out of it. You know, if you did, great. Glad to be of service. So peace.